The government wants to slim down the national curriculum to focus only on what it calls essential knowledge. It also wants more traditional exams. So what do you need to know about the recent White Paper's plans to reform what is taught and tested in schools? More than 20 years ago, Kenneth Baker was the first Education Secretary to introduce a national curriculum for 5 to 16-year-olds.
Ladies and gentlemen, could I welcome you to this press conference, which is designed to launch the Education Reform Bill, which was presented to Parliament this morning.
From the start, critics said it was overcrowded. Ever since, few Education Secretaries have been able to resist the temptation to amend it. Now, Michael Gove too wants a tighter, more rigorous curriculum, which will be what he calls a benchmark, not a straitjacket. Although the curriculum review is yet to report, experts like Tina Isaacs from the Institute of Education detect a clear direction of travel.
What the Secretary of State wants to do is have students learn the essentials. So what every well-educated 14-year-old should know about core content, and to leave the additional content and the additional ways of teaching students up to the schools themselves, which is no bad thing.
In primary schools, this means support for schools to teach systematic synthetic phonics, a reading check at age 6 to ensure children have mastered basic skills of early reading, a review of the early years foundation stage, and a review of Key Stage 2 tests, so parents can get the information they need without schools feeling they must drill children.
Well, let's be absolutely clear, this is not a reading test by any stretch of the imagination. It's a decoding test. And the fact is that some children at 6 are able to decode very well and some children are not. And if what happens is that they're not able to decode, so they are put through a very rigorous programme of learning to decode, no guarantee that they will learn to read.
The government's white paper made a lot of play about moving away from centrally set targets, but actually what we've got here is very specific things on phonics and on a reading test. Isn't that effectively going to drive schools in one particular direction?
It really depends on what the tests look like, and of course we can't know that from this white paper. Is it going to be something that's done quite casually, not reported out publicly, only reported out to parents? You would have a different way of approaching it if that's what the test were to look like. But if this is something that becomes a milestone at age 6, that's reported out school by school, then schools will behave in a way that will make them train these children to take these tests in possibly not the best way.
Secondary schools also face big changes to what is taught and tested. The new compulsory curriculum will have a greater focus on subject content and will prescribe the essential knowledge and understanding that pupils must gain. A new award, the English Baccalaureate, will measure how many pupils achieve good GCSEs in English, maths, science, a modern or ancient foreign language, and a humanity such as history or geography. And the proportion of pupils attaining the English Baccalaureate will be recorded in league tables, comparing school performance.
Schools in better off areas are going to be freer to focus on subjects such as languages and history, and schools serving more disadvantaged communities are going to have to focus very rigorously on the basics, English and maths, so you're setting up quite a difference there, I think.
The effect will be that schools will concentrate on those 5 academic GCSEs, and all the government's efforts in terms of the pupil premium and in terms of a review of vocational qualifications will be downplayed. What we're going to see, it was never really went away, but is going to be strengthened, is the academic vocational divide. Academic qualifications will be worth a lot, vocational qualifications will be worth very little.
It seems that the coalition is going to scrap the equivalents for GCSE equivalents qualifications, and I think that could have a big effect on certainly on league table positions.
From my own perspective, I do actually welcome the English Baccalaureate, but it might lead to, in some areas, I suppose, some parents possibly wanting to send their children to a school where the percentage achieving the English Bac is very high, and perhaps then segregating schools to a certain extent. We don't know.
So do you think it might actually divert pupils away from vocational courses?
Listening to my colleagues, I know that's already happening. In my position, we've never really done very much vocational education, not very many BTECs, because we've always, even though we're considered to be a sort of, I suppose, a complex urban school, we've always held on to a broad, balanced curriculum for all. And so I suppose we're slightly better placed than some schools might be.
Other changes to the secondary curriculum include reviewing the range of vocational qualifications on offer, taking greater account of spelling, punctuation and grammar in exam marking, and looking at shifting the emphasis from modular GCSEs and A-levels to linear assessment.
I think some of that is maybe driven by the universities, and they've been criticising the modularisation in the system, but I think, to be honest, I think there's been quite a lot of criticism from outside of the system about the way that works, and specifically on the amount of time that children spend being examined as opposed to, building deeper understanding.
The White Paper says the new curriculum will be built around traditional subjects and will borrow from the best models around the world, such as Singapore or Alberta. Some commentators have looked at the essential proposals in the White Paper, things like the English back and linear exams, as if it's a return to the 1950s and a very traditional approach.
I think it's slightly unfair. It is certainly more traditional than we've conceived it over the last few years. As I say, it's definitely a shift in emphasis away from skills-based attempts, interdisciplinary curriculum, to a more subject-oriented curriculum. But I also think that by saying that this government wants to legislate less curriculum and less about how teachers approach their subjects, that it's not returning to the traditional diet of the 1950s.
It is perhaps slightly curious that the government is saying that there's certain essential knowledge that all pupils must learn, while at the same time encouraging all schools to become academies, and academies, of course, don't have to teach the national curriculum. But in the White Paper there is a hint that in future even academies will be required by law to teach at least a broad and balanced curriculum.